What is the meaning of life? Few questions carry so much weight and, at the same time, sound so useless. Perhaps that's precisely why it bothers us so much, because it confronts us with emptiness, with the lack of guarantees, with the deafening silence of the universe. How many times have you found yourself searching for answers in books, religions, movies, or even catchphrases shared on social media? And yet, everything seems to slip through your fingers. Are we asking the wrong question? Instead of searching for the meaning of life, should we be looking in another direction? In this video, we will traverse the unstable terrain of great philosophies, scientific explanations, and the most intimate human experiences to understand why this question, as silly as it may seem, may be exactly what makes us human. The question that haunts us, what is the meaning of life? Perhaps no other phrase has been repeated, felt, and feared as much as this one. It spans generations, civilizations, religions, sciences, and above all, it silently crosses the soul of each one of us, often in the most difficult moments. But what if this question has no answer? What if the simple fact of asking it is already a symptom of human despair in the face of uncertainty? Albert Camus, one of the great names of existentialism, said that the real philosophical problem is suicide, because when faced with the realization that the universe is indifferent and that life apparently has no predetermined meaning, what is left for us? To continue living anyway? To create meaning where there is none? Or simply to give up? This is where this seemingly idiotic question becomes essential, not because of what it answers, but because of what it reveals about us. It reveals our thirst for belonging, our eagerness for purpose, our fear that everything is in vain. But think about it. Why does this question haunt us so much? Perhaps because we have been conditioned to seek meaning outside ourselves, in dogmas, in promises of happiness, in social norms. And when these systems fail, we are left naked before existence. It's no wonder that many modern thinkers criticize this obsession with absolute meaning, because it paralyzes us. It turns life into a kind of puzzle that must be solved before it can be lived. What if, instead of seeking universal meaning, we learn to deal with uncertainty, to build meaning from the little things? An honest conversation, a gesture of compassion, the beauty of a sunset. Simple things, but when experienced with presence, they say more about the value of life than any abstract theory. The meaning may not lie in the answer, but in the courage to keep asking. Not to run away from the void, but to learn to dance with it. Because it is in this movement between doubt and creation that life becomes life. For millennia, humanity has sought answers in the heavens, in the divine, in the invisible. Religion was, and still is for many, a refuge from existential chaos. After all, what could be more comforting than the idea that there is a greater plan? That your pain, your sacrifice, your existence, all of it has a purpose determined by something or someone greater. Religions such as Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism offer powerful narratives about why we are here. They speak of mission, redemption, transcendence. Faith, in this context, not only gives meaning to life, it gives direction. And that can be liberating or imprisoning. But not everyone was satisfied with these answers. With the advancement of reason, philosophy was born. And with it, a new way of thinking about the meaning of life, no longer as something revealed, but as something constructed. The ancient Greeks, for example, did not ask, "What is the meaning of life?" but "How to live well." For Socrates, the examined life was the path to virtue. For Aristotle, happiness, eudaimonia, was the result of a life full of ethical and rational actions. The The Stoics, such as Seneca, saw meaning in the serene acceptance of what cannot be controlled. Then came the modern thinkers. Nietzsche, for example, tore the veil of religion with his iconic phrase, "God is dead." For him, this was not a celebration of atheism, but a lament for the collapse of all certainties. Life, without a pre-established meaning, requires us to continually reinvent ourselves, to create our own values, to say yes to life, even in the face of absurdity. But between absolute faith and radical skepticism, there is a gray area, a space where many of us live, where we seek meaning not because we are certain, but because without it, life seems dull. Philosophy and religion, despite their differences, share this restlessness. Both try, in their own way, to answer the same silent cry. Why are we here? And perhaps the greatest challenge is not to choose between one or the other, but to recognize that deep down, every human being is trying to cope with the same emptiness. The emptiness of being alive and not knowing why. Existentialism offers no easy answers. It promises no heaven, no redemption, no absolute meaning. It delivers exactly the opposite, the brutal responsibility of being free. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the leading representatives of this school of thought, wrote that man is condemned to be free. At first glance, this phrase seems contradictory. How can someone be condemned to freedom? But for Sartre, freedom is not a gift, it is a burden, because with it comes the anguish of choosing, of making mistakes, of living without guarantees. In existentialist logic, there is no essence before existence. In other words, you are born without a defined purpose. You exist first, and only later, through your choices, do you build who you are. This may sound desperate, or deeply liberating. Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Auschwitz survivor, transformed this view into something even more human. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he recounts how even in the hell of concentration camps, those who managed to find some kind of meaning, however small, had a better chance of surviving. For Frankl, the meaning of life is not something given, but something found in relationships with others, in overcoming suffering, in work, in love. This is where philosophy meets psychology. For many of us, the meaning of life will not come from a revelation, but from a decision. From accepting that we don't have a manual, but we do have the possibility to build paths. But this freedom is frightening, because it implies responsibility. You can no longer blame God, fate, or society. You are the author of your story, including the blank pages, the erasures, the painful paragraphs. And perhaps that is why so many people flee from this freedom. We prefer the comfort zone of ready-made answers to the risk of creating something new. But living authentically requires courage. Courage to choose. Courage to make mistakes. Courage to bear the weight of your own existence. Existentialism is not an invitation to despair. It is a call to authenticity. It is a chance to transform anguish into action, emptiness into creation. Because in the end, it is not life that needs to have meaning. It is you who must decide what to do with it. Science does not promise meaning. It delivers facts. While religion and philosophy seek answers to the why, science focuses on the how. How did the universe come into being? How did life form? How did consciousness emerge from a soup of atoms and molecules? And perhaps that is precisely why it is so frightening when it comes to the meaning of life. Because, unlike comfortable beliefs, science puts us in our proper place in the cosmos. A small blue dot in a cold and silent vastness. According to evolutionary biology, for example, there is no intrinsic purpose to human existence. We are the result of natural selection, a blind, unintentional process, The human brain, with all its complexity, was not designed to find meaning, but to survive, to feel pleasure, avoid pain, reproduce. The rest is cultural construction. Cosmology goes even further. According to most scientific models, the universe did not arise with a purpose. It simply happened. An abrupt expansion about 13.8 billion years ago. No witnesses, no direction, no plan. These ideas, although well-founded, can generate a feeling of emptiness, so-called scientific nihilism. If everything is chance, if nothing has purpose, why live? But this view is only part of the equation. Science also gives us something precious, context. It reveals the miracle of existence, the almost infinite improbability of you being here, now, conscious, listening to these words. Every atom in your body was once part of a star. Every thought you have is a product of billions of years of cosmic evolution. Carl Sagan said, "We are the way the cosmos knows itself." And that changes everything. Because even without a defined cosmic purpose, we can choose to marvel at the fact that we are alive. We can use scientific knowledge not as a spiritual death sentence, but as a source of inspiration to live more consciously. Science may not answer the why, but it shows us how rare it is to be here. And often, that's enough. Because knowing that life is fragile, fleeting, and improbable invites us to value it. In the end, perhaps science and philosophy are not on opposite sides, but in dialogue. A dialogue that reminds us the universe may not have a plan, but we have the ability to create beauty anyway. After delving into the grand explanations, from faith to reason, from philosophy to science, something remains intact: individual restlessness. Because deep down, the meaning of life is not a universal concept, but an intimate experience. Something that is revealed not in formulas, but in steps. And each step is different for each person. The personal journey is often silent. It does not happen in books or cathedrals, but in everyday life. In the choices we make when we wake up, in the way we treat those we love, in the way we react to pain. It is in the loss of a loved one that we feel the weight of finitude. It is in a health crisis that we realize the value of the body. It is when we are betrayed or abandoned that we ask ourselves who we really are. And in these unexpected, often painful twists and turns of life, something begins to emerge. A meaning built on experience, not theory. There is no manual. There is no right way. But there is something we all have: the ability to listen to ourselves. And this is perhaps the most neglected aspect of our culture, which shouts out answers, but fears the silence necessary to hear the right questions. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself what really matters to you? Not what you've been told should matter, but what, when you close your eyes, still makes sense even when everything falls apart. That's where authenticity comes in. When we stop living under the expectations of others and start building a life that resonates with our deepest values. It's not about living a happy life in the superficial sense, but about living a life consistent with what we believe, even if it costs us discomfort, difficult choices, sacrifices. Each of us carries a unique journey, and it is in this uniqueness that the possibility of meaning lies. Because purpose is not something you discover all at once, but something that reveals itself little by little as you live with truth, presence, and courage. The question then ceases to be, what is the meaning of life? And becomes, what makes my life worthwhile today? After so many unanswered questions, so many paths analyzed, from faith to reason, from philosophy to science, from emptiness to freedom, perhaps one inevitable conclusion remains. The meaning of life is not something you find. It is something you build. And that construction does not begin with a grand revelation. It begins in the now. We live in a time that teaches us to chase goals, status, achievements, but we are rarely taught to stop, to listen, to simply exist with presence. And perhaps that is why so many are lost, because they confuse movement with direction. But what if the purpose of life is not found in great achievements? What if it is found in the way you go through your everyday life, in the way you face pain, how you welcome others, how you deal with your failures, how you treat those who can offer you nothing in return, and above all, how you treat yourself? Living with purpose is not about having all the answers. It is about living with awareness. It is about saying yes to life, even with its contradictions, its losses, its silences. It's about having the courage to commit to something greater than your own ego, a cause, a relationship, an inner truth. And if you've made it this far, that already says a lot about you, about your thirst for depth, for honesty, for meaning. That's rare. And that's why this space exists, to welcome those concerns that most people avoid. So if this video resonated with you, even if only on one specific point, like the video and subscribe to the channel. It may seem like a simple gesture, but it helps keep this space alive, breathing, reaching other people who, like you, are also trying to find a more authentic way to live. And if you want to go further, consider leaving a donation of any amount. Your help strengthens this work and allows more content like this to reach those who really need reflection, acceptance, and direction. And finally, if you've read this far, really, write in the comments, meaning of life. This isn't just a sign that you are here. It's a silent testimony that you're willing to face the big questions. And that's already a start.